You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by FreightPlus. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. It is National Truck Driver Awareness Week, September 12th through the 18th in 2021. Very, very awesome week. Something that, everyone in the logistics industry really needs to be out there thanking their truck drivers, providing stuff, give them things, help them out. It's been such a hard going. It's a dumpster fire. I think Chris Peckham said the biggest dumpster fire ever. So it's hard for everyone. So this week really is important to just show your appreciation for something that is vital to our lives. It's 80% of goods that you touch us are moved via truck. So it's something that we really need to talk about. And there's a big issue happening right now. So I had to bring on this best person, the one that I know most folks love to listen to, Jill Clifford, president here at FreightPlus.
Hi, Kyle.
How's it going?
Good.
We're going to talk. There's been a recent conversation, a lot of interesting stuff. It's estimated that it's 1.1 million new drivers need to be hired for the industry, or roughly over the next 10 years, or roughly 110,000 per year truck drivers need to be brought in. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is why we talk about capacity issues in the mode. A lot of why can't I get my stuff picked up? It's all of that. And one of the biggest things is the aging workforce, mm-hmm. And the fact that it's an older demographic, which you kind of like, why is that? So I want to talk about that with you today.
Sure.
Let's jump right into it. Why is it such a struggle to get younger workers?
Yeah, and I think we all, of course, now in the middle of a pandemic, and we've had these disasters going on with wildfires and tornadoes and hurricanes. And, of course, there's capacity problems, but we've had a driver shortage for many years now. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so there's a lot of reasons for it. One is we're not raising kids to be truck drivers. We're not raising kids to be working on docks and warehouses. We're really raising kids to go to college or live out their passions, right? When I was growing up, nobody ever talked about, well, what do you think you'd like to do? It was, get out and make some money, girl, because you got to pay your bills, right? So, I think the world has changed a lot. And I, kind of grew up in my career in transportation in a trucking terminal. And we were all around, the same age. It was young, it was vibrant. There were some really great people that were in the industry for a long time that were good mentors. But really, there were a younger demographic working in transportation operations, not even just driving trucks.
Right.
And if you walk into a freight terminal now, specifically like LTL, less than truckload terminals, there's not a lot of young people working in them. They're in college and they're getting degrees in finance and computer science and engineering and, sales, and they're interested in marketing and communications. And I'm sure, we see it in our recruitment, getting excited about freight. And when you're here, you realize, wow, this is an industry that I could really get excited about. But I think it's a tough sell.
But the one thing it's interesting, especially you, I know your background. There's a great podcast for people to listen to. You've been on a bunch of podcasts, so people should absolutely listen to that because your background's so fascinating because you did just work. You kind of were there. You kind of stumbled upon it. And half our guys back here stumbled upon freight. They stumbled upon logistics. I wonder where's the disconnect happening. Why? Because most of you graduate college, you still really don't know what you want to do half the time, unless you're very set on this is what I wanted to be. But why aren't people? Why isn't the young folks stumbling into an LTL job? Why aren't they just, hey, you know what? I got to pick up a job. This is something that's a little more interesting.
Well, I think now it's better, in terms of supply chain, it's better. You have colleges offering supply chain programs. And so they're getting exposed to it. And, we have folks here, right? And Jackson will tell you, I was, doing school abroad in Germany, and I had to pick a class and I didn't know what to do. And I just chose supply chain, and wow, it really piqued my interest. I never thought about all the things we have and how did we get them? And how do you look at inventory? there's warehouse. He didn't know any of that. It was a whole new world to him, and probably Megan too, right? So, I think that in terms of supply chain, I think you're going to get a lot more people exposed, and you're seeing it. Supply chain under 30.
Right.
You're seeing a lot of, consular logistics management. They all have these kind of young organizations within their organizations, but it's not helping warehouse operations,
And truck
driver
drivers,
shortages,
right.
truck drivers. And I am so happy to be talking about truck drivers this week. And because, again, it's not what people think about all the time, right? And you can have all the technology and all the automation you want. And I think Ryan actually said it on our show, talking with Steve, is it's really about meeting people where they are. And truck drivers, they're driving trucks, they're delivering product, they're hitting docks and warehouses. Great that you can give them an app to use in order to tell you where they are, or that they've delivered clear or delivered with exception. But is that really service? And,
Right.
in my mind, it's not.
Right.
We're still all human beings. And I think the one thing we don't realize is, what do you hear? Dunkin' Donuts, like, isn't there a thing like keeps America running?
Yeah.
Well, that's
America
a
runs on
lie.
Dunkin's. Yeah.
Truck drivers keep America running.
Seriously.
And if you talk to truck drivers, what you learn about them is they're very, very proud of that. They're very proud of that. They're almost like being in the military. They're very proud that they do keep America running.
Right.
And so if you think about meeting them where they are, it's that pride for the work that they do. So when they do hit your dock and they do check in with freight, thank them, be kind, be respectful. I can't tell you over the years how many warehouses I've been in, and just watch the interaction between a warehouse person checking in a driver, and they're not even acknowledged sometimes.
Right.
And that's not good service. It's just not.
And it feels like the more I've been in the industry, you kind of learn, like, it's not just sitting in a car and driving, which already stinks. I mean, I'm over 30 and my butt hurts right now so bad. I have to stand up and all the young guys laugh at me, but like it's taxing. It's not just the driving though. Like, it's the loading, it's the pickup, it's that type of stuff. And like you read more and more about it. You're like, wow, like it's not easy. It's not just driving a car.
And
like,
then think about it. If LTL is a little bit different. You can be a truck driver and be home every night, right? And run a local run so you're home. But if you think about long haul truck drivers, I can imagine that years ago it was something that was very interesting to somebody who was a free spirit, who wanted to see the country and travel the back roads of America. And that's a type of personality, right? That's someone who's very free spirited and very open and very curious minded. And now we've taken a truck driver and we've tracked every single move they make, right? And we can contact them at any second of any day. So, even that, being mindful that, we all have jobs and we work so many hours a week, and we get to go home and enjoy families and enjoy our life outside of work. And, truck drivers, honestly, can they? They're on the road, they're away from their families, and they don't even get a moment to breathe. They're being tracked with our technology and our automation, or they're being texted. It just goes on. And so I really think where it was an attractive thing to do for the right person, it's much less attractive for that type of person now. And so we've got to, as an industry, really recognize, how do we make this work for the country, and how do we get more drivers? How do we get more people to want to drive? And I think that's the trick. I think there's a lot of ways to support it.
Yeah, and you make a really great point too. I mean, the internet's a thing. So like not back in the day, but like even,
I was there.
Like in the 90s, like how are you going to see the country? How are you really going to go out there and stuff? Like, it's really a limited few. I can easily see why that, like, I want to get out there. I want to see this stuff. But now I can just go on my phone and I can see what this is, and I'm connected a little bit more than I ever was. Like, you don't kind of have that. I could see maybe that's why the younger workers don't see like, oh wow, this is a really cool thing.
Mhm.
Like they've just experienced so much in the phone at the point where they're just like, what do you mean? I got to drive? Like, I can't do that. But
I just think as an industry though, we got to figure out how to get back to basics there.
right,
And there are people that college is not for them.
100%.
And sitting at a desk all day is
Not
not for them.
right.
And driver wages, they have to improve. It used to be, you could have a pretty lucrative career driving a truck um, and make a living. And maybe you were married and your wife didn't have to work and she could stay home with the kids or whatever it may be, whatever your situation may be. But, I think that's part of it too. But it really comes down to we have a massive, massive problem in the industry, and it didn't happen because of COVID. It's been here for a long time.
Yeah, it happened because of complacency. So let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that in the aging workforce. So help me understand, especially as people work younger or work older, they kind of stay
Mhm.
in the careers longer. Why does an aging workforce, why is it such a strain on capacity kind of right now? Why does an older generation working in trucking, why does that matter?
Well, and I think it's more than just the older generation, but what's happening is people are retiring. They're aging out and retiring,
Mhm.
and there's no new folks coming in to offset those retirees, right? Um, but again, I think it's a lifestyle choice being a truck driver, and I think as an industry, we got to get back to why it would be a great thing for somebody to be a truck driver.
Yeah, it's fast. Very interesting because like the stats are like 70% of U.S. goods are moved via truck. I
Hmm.
mean, to me, that would. I'm sure a lot of businesses, a lot of people we talk to, a lot of the prospects, a lot of our clients are like, well, it's a machine. What do you mean that people retiring causes a glitch in this machine? Like why? Like
Well, it
how
still
is
takes humans to drive a truck.
right? I know.
Yeah, it still does. So, that's the dilemma. And you could look at it a couple of different ways. There's a bill coming in where they're trying to push that you can drive a truck at 18. And there's a lot of controversy around that. I think of your 18-year-old kid driving a truck. But if they're trained in it, you look at these vocational high schools where kids are being trained for nursing, they're being trained as an auto mechanic. If it's almost the same approach. And I think for the right kid, thinking college isn't for them, or honestly, now the expense of college, it is overwhelming for kids now heading into college, whether you have the means or not. It's so incredibly expensive. And if you don't know what you want to do and you're going to go put six figures into a college education, that's a big dive, right?
Right.
So, I think that there is such a need and such a shortage. And we just have to find some balance on how to get folks excited about transportation and driving a truck again.
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 billion question right
Mhm.
now, right? How do you make it exciting? And I know there's stuff like
Yeah.
influencers, like truck talk and truck influencers and stuff like that, where it's out there,
Mhm.
but how successful is it going to be? We talk a little bit about that kind of bill or the incentive to get more younger drivers. What about like women drivers? I know of my readings, it's been kind of notoriously an underserved
Yeah.
demographic. Why is that the case, and how are companies kind of going about trying to get more?
And there has been a big push. I think what you saw a few years back was companies really targeting veterans.
Mhm.
Again, that pride
Right,
of,
right,
working for America, working in the US of A. And so they target a lot of military folks who have come into the transportation industry. That was a big push. And there's also now a big push for women in trucking. Um, you know, and I don't know, it could just be the same old gender stuff, the safety of it, the being on the road by yourself. But you're seeing a lot more women truck drivers, and there's organizations out there. Women in Trucking is one of them, and Women in Trucking isn't an organization of working with folks like me who work in an office in transportation. It's for women in trucking, for women truck drivers. So
right.
it's fantastic that organizations are really making the push for that because it is the right lifestyle for the right people. It's just bringing the awareness to it. And I think us as a transportation industry, we've got to really, really understand how important driving a truck is and show that respect and professionalism and kindness to those truck drivers. And again, if you're in a receiving warehouse or a shipping warehouse and you're not allowing drivers to use a restroom, that's not okay. And it still happens, right? And it is, I think the driver is the last person to touch the freight, right?
Right.
So, it's always up, and everything's inventories are delayed. I mean, the market's just a mess, like Chris says, it's a dumpster fire. And so everything's late even before you give it to your carrier. It's
Right,
probably already late. And so that driver is just under immense amount of pressure. And, we see it. You see bad behavior. There are people yelling at each other and swearing at each other. And, that's just got to stop. And if you're a truck driver and you're dealing with that day in and day out across multiple shippers and multiple 3PL intermediary, our 3PL environment, they're going to be like, I'm out of this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go landscape or do construction and probably make more money and not get a whole bunch of crap every day like this. This is a lot.
Well, I got to imagine too, it's got to be frustrating, like you say, the fact that everything's trackable now. The fact that, and ideally, I mean, I'm thinking, putting my optimistic hat on, and most of the younger generation's grown up being tracked. They're
Correct.
kind of okay with it.
Yes.
I mean, not knock on wood, it's not a great thing, but they're probably going to be a little more comfortable with it.
No,
but the same,
you make a great point. In some environments it is, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like they understand
Yes.
that. But like I could see too, where like as a driver, like just complete frustration, because you're like, yeah, you understand, like you can go on Google Maps and you can look and it says it's supposed to take 2.5 hours, but like that's a generalization. It's not the real world. It's not on the ground right now driving through this stuff. You're not
Correct.
experiencing these things that I'm experiencing. Trust me, I pull up my Waves app every time coming here to work, and it takes me a million times different ways. I know some ways that are faster. Sometimes all of a sudden there's a detour, and then Waves is like, oh yeah, it's going to be an extra 30 minutes. You're like, what the hell, Waves? And they're like, this is technology, my thing.
Right.
Like I could see that being a big frustration for poor drivers of just like, man, this is like shipper. And like we could talk the other side too of just how hard it is for a shipper, how often you're picking up the phone, how often you're trying to email, how often that there's bad actors on both sides of this game that we play. So it's really hard for everyone involved. But like you're saying, it's just have that appreciation that like, hey, no one's really out there to screw you. And if they are, it's because you didn't hire a managed trans company like FreightPlus that really went through and brokered to make sure we did everything right to give you the best asset carriers.
But if you think about it, there's 400,000 asset carriers in the market, and a big majority of them have like 6 trucks or less.
Right.
So what does that mean? Is you're dealing with truck drivers, which is, I think, so great. If we can, as a managed trans provider, we are in between the shipper and that driver, and it's our job to be transparent, be professional, help solve problems. A lot of times it's so easy just to blame the carrier, blame the driver, blame the carrier, and a lot of times it might be the shipper or receiver that's causing the bad behavior, whether they're delaying a dock pickup or a delivery or anything like that. And so I think it's if you can take on that culture of really being kind and respectful. I know how silly that sounds, but honestly, the drivers, a vast amount of these 400,000 carriers, great, you have automation. Thank you. Great that you have the ability to track my drivers everywhere they are, and great that you pay us fast. But we also want you to be professional and kind to our drivers, and that's what driver retention. These carriers, these smaller asset carriers, driver retention is huge. Right now they're just stealing one from the other, right? The carriers are offering larger bonuses, drivers are bumping. But if you can really create a good work experience, people are going to stay. And I think one of the things about just all of us as a whole is we do want a good working experience, and we do want to work in a good culture. And that holds true across the board. And so if you can bring that level of professionalism, transparency, and respect right down to the driver, you're going to get a good experience. And then hopefully that driver is going to say, this is good work. I like this work. And I know someone else who does too, right? Because, it's got to turn. It really does. And I don't think the autonomous trucks, I know we talk about it a lot. And even it's interesting, more people outside of the industry probably ask you that because you're in trucking. They probably say, well, what's going on with this
Right.
autonomous trucks? And, I think one, if it happens, it's a long way out. And two, I think it's on, very dedicated lanes, which much of the freight moving is not dedicated lanes.
Right.
It's, lanes with not a lot of volume in them. It's, last minute freight. It's, and those are all truck drivers handling that freight. So we definitely as an organization have to get better at it. And if you're not thanking your drivers, especially this week, you're doing it wrong. So just make sure if you're a shipper or receiver, you're being kind to your drivers. It's super important.
Yeah, I mean, and they're just people. I
Mhm.
sit out in the open. I sit out there near the carrier ops team, and I mean, I remember the story where one of the guys, like, again, like you say, it can be the shipper sometimes, and one of the driver was sitting on the dock for 3 hours, and they're like, okay, well, it's Friday. Can you kind of move it over to Monday? And the guy's like, I can't. It's my daughter's birthday. Like, I can't
Mhm.
do that. I need to be home. And like at the end of it is people, right? That's
Right.
the one thing I think that because it is a machine, because 70% of goods get
Yes.
touched, you forget that it's people
Yeah. And
operating
would you
this.
want to miss your daughter's
No, I
birthday,
would I
right?
would leave the truck right there. I could care
Yeah.
less. I
And
would never miss it.
so many companies would just say, well, you have to wait, and they just
Right.
disregard
Yeah, you're
really
not
the
even human
magnitude
at
of the
that. Right.
situation. Right. And I think that's why it's really important for us as, as a managed trans in that kind of 3PL space that we manage those problems the right way. The
Right.
customer isn't always right. And those discussions are sometimes hard to have, but you have to have them. There were plenty of times through this whole pandemic where you had companies calling and yelling at people. You're
Right.
just not going to call here and yell at people. We're not going to do that. We're going to be kind.
Right.
And and that's what we expect as a company, how we deal with drivers and carriers and our clients. We're going to be transparent, we're going to be kind, we're going to be respectful, and we're going to help you solve problems. And there's a lot of them right now. There's a lot of problems. So I think I really do think that's where it starts. It sounds super silly. I don't think it's tech and automation. Those have to happen and they need to be available to drivers and to those smaller carriers who may not have the infrastructure for it. You need to support them with those things. You need to pay them fast,
Right.
right? You got to get them paid. But you really have to treat them well. And
Remember they're humans.
mhm,
Remember that they have a life outside
I
a truck. As much
completely
as pride that
agree.
they take, they still have a family. They have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's transition a little bit as we start to wrap up. Especially, let's talk about something that it's almost the elephant in the room: the infrastructure bill.
Hmm.
It's a very interesting thing. We recently were on actually a client call. We were listening
Hmm.
in, and they were excited about the infrastructure bill. They thought, okay, cool. They clean up the roads. They make this a little more enticing. People aren't so desperate for this stuff. But why can the infrastructure bill sort of maybe be a more detriment to some of
Yeah.
the capacity issues?
Yeah, and his thoughts on that were dead on, right?
Right.
So we have this massive infrastructure bill in our country, and that's going to create more jobs, and the roads are going to get better, and the roads are going to be better for truck drivers, and that's going to hopefully promote more truck drivers. But the flip side of that is what that's going to do is pull more capacity out of the market because the government's going to have to move equipment for all of that infrastructure. So all of these construction projects you're going to need drivers and you're going to need trailers and you're going to need product moved
Oh
around.
yeah.
And that's going to take more capacity that we don't have out of the industry. And then it's, well, why do they get it and we don't? Well, because they're going to pay more for it.
Right.
So it's, they've been funded. And so they have the means and they're going, and that in of itself will increase market, which is already grossly, it's so inflated right now compared to 2 years ago, right? So you're probably going to see higher costs for freight in given markets, and then you're going to see even lesser of the capacity. So
Right.
that's kind of the flip side of that infrastructure bill.
Now, what about the construction job? Because that's another thing. I talked to
Hmm.
Chris Peckham a little bit after that. He's like, oh yeah, well, there's going to be all these construction projects which are going to take more drivers off the road. How? Like, I'm a
Yeah.
little like, I guess maybe I'm
Yeah,
very
because
ignorant to this, but
just
like,
say you're a long haul driver and there's a construction project going on in your town, and they're going to hire 100 people short term, and these construction problems. They say mean, how long did we deal?
Yeah. I mean, the Quincy one that we're driving past,
Yeah,
like,
that's
oh
right.
my gosh.
Think of any construction project in your town or city, and they're supposed to be 3 months, and they end up being 3 years, right? And so a truckload driver may say, wow, I'm going to get out of the truck. I'm going to get out of the daily grind of being tracked and haunted and sitting at docks and being late for deliveries and having people upset with me. And I'm going to go do this construction project, and I'm going to make more money, and I'm going to be home every night for my family. And so they jump out of the truck and they jump back in. And I think that's the other thing, as an industry, because of the massive amounts of carriers, the 400,000 carriers, and a very large percentage of them have 6 trucks or less. You'd be shocked to see how many carriers, if you look at like the MC authorities, jump in and out. I think I heard a number last week. It was like 11,000 carriers came into the market today, but another, 8,000 came out. And that's what it is. It's one driver with a tractor trailer and an MC, and they'll jump out and do landscaping, and then they'll jump back in their truck, right? And they'll reactivate their MC authorities. So it's such a fragmented market, and I'm talking like full truckload, but that's why they jump. And, it's, if I can get on this project and make more money and be home every night, that's what I'm going to do. I get a few months home with my family before I jump back in the truck again.
But you would think that it's like so physically demanding construction. Like, how could you possibly, especially if it's an aging workforce where like it's like 49 is the average age of the truck driver, and like 73%, I want to say, of that is like 40 plus, like of that demographic. I'm
surprised it's 49. I thought the last I heard it was like almost 60. So maybe it is getting better.
Yeah. But like, I know
your stats right.
I know Chris was saying like, oh, well, it's an average, like the average. But when you really look at it, it's still 73% of them are 40 plus. So that's it's not like if the other side of the average is that, like, yeah, sure, the average is there, but it's not an even curvature.
Yeah.
Why would construction be? I feel like physically construction's got to be harder to just jump in. But
I mean, if you're probably for a long haul driver, given that you tend to not load and unload trucks, for less than truckload carrier, you are unloading freight and delivering freight. But think about the physical health of being a long haul truck driver sitting in a truck. They may be excited to get out and get moving and get some physical activity.
Yeah, they all mention how hard it is.
Yeah,
I know. I watch a YouTube
eating
channel
on the road.
Yeah, and it's never good food. It's not like it's healthy food or anything like that.
And what struck me too, and again, it's just the market's been such a mess, and rates are all over the place. And thank goodness we have great market expertise here to really educate our clients. And sometimes it's educating them in the week. There was a protest going on in Minnesota, and the rate that day went up like $1,000 to get something delivered into this area. And, the customer was like, wait a minute, how did that happen? And they had this footage. And so in the middle of this protest, a truckload carrier is trying to get through, and, they're going really slow, and the police are asking everyone to move out of the way. But it got so violent that somebody actually climbed the cab of the truck, pulled the driver out of the window, and they were like beating him up for no reason, just because they were protesting something else. This man was just trying to do his job, right? And, I don't think people recognize that's an extreme situation, but, you don't let a truck driver, man or woman, use your restroom. They can't sit in your cafeteria and have lunch. They're eating in a truck that they've just spent 10 hours driving. And so, again, it really just comes down. I think we've got to do a really good job. I'm proud of truck drivers, and I want everyone else to be proud of them too. And we need them. They are critical for all of us, even as consumers, not as people in the industry. We wouldn't exist with everything we have without them. So it's so important.
All right. So let's wrap up. It's National Truck Driver, National Appreciation for Truck Drivers. You worked on a terminal. What's a really good way, especially for companies, to show their appreciation? I know this is on a Friday, so it's a little bit late, but is it get them lunch? Is it provide options? Like what's something good to do for a truck driver if you really want to show your appreciation other than just posting and saying that attaboy on the back when they drop off?
If you're in a truck terminal and you really have the ability to look at truck drivers and see them in the real human state, it's, thank them for all they do. And yeah, absolutely. Lunch on a time off, right? I mean, even some time off would be great. And I think for the rest of us, again, if you have any interaction with a truck driver, regardless of Truck Driver Appreciation Week, you should be building a relationship and thanking them for all they do, because they do a lot. And I think they go unnoticed a lot of the times as well. And again, I know it's simple, but it really is human kindness and being respectful. And I think at times I've seen too many times than I like that falls short in our industry. So take care of those drivers and be kind and thank them.
It's funny.
Thank them a lot.
It's like when I used to work in the nonprofit with the education side, we'd talk about like, well, how do we get people to do the fire life safety stuff? Because every kid knows stop, drop, and roll. You're like, but that means you're on fire. Like there was a bunch of other things you should have done before you were stop, dropping, rolling. It's great that you remembered that part. But it was one of those we talk about. We're like, man, how do you get someone to like experience the 40 hours a week we sit in here and really hear about all these things and how you can be proactive? It's sort of the same with this. Like I'm sitting there and you get to hear these stories. You get to learn what truck drivers, and it kind of helps remember like it's not a machine. These are people that are operating this. Right. And it's a vital thing to kind of remember.
Well, and I think in our business, really, how you take care of your truck drivers is you keep them moving. And when they get hung up, you help them solve those problems and solve them fast. And you can't do that behind an email. You've got to pick up the phone. You've got to make stuff happen. And, I think probably one of my most personal proud moments here is talking to our carrier asset base. And one of the reasons they like working with us is because we don't hide behind email and we are honest and we do reply. And if a shipper or a receiver is behaving badly, we are all over that. And we are making sure that drivers' problems are getting solved. And, it goes both ways. And I think if we all handled things like that, the truck drivers would be in a lot better place and there might be a lot more of them, right, which we desperately, desperately need.
Yeah. And we talk about, it's your brand. Your brand it's these truck drivers. So your brand experience isn't just how well you box this package up and how much marketing put into this thing. It's the truck driver delivering the product to the customer.
Yep.
That's a brand experience. You got to pay attention to it. And I think that's one of the really cool things we do here. Like you say, we're really great. And this is going to turn into a little promo, but the idea of it's hard. Like you talk to logistics managers, we talk to our prospect, and we talk about it all the time. Like the amount of work that they're doing, I can see why a lot of times you just do it as an email because you have the time and phone and stuff like that. That's where managed transits are really vital, especially for growing and mid-sized companies, a vital service to have for your transportation program. It's not just cost savings. Well, it's this.
And it's hard.
So hard.
It's the grind. You hear our team out on the phone all day working with these carriers, trying to solve problems. It's the day-to-day grind. It is not easy work. And so to have someone who, with the mindset that I am going to tell the truth and I am going to be transparent, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you solve this problem, whether you're a truck driver, a carrier, a shipper, a receiver, man, that's really good service. And you would think that with the basics of the 101, but a lot of people don't do it, and it needs to be done. It just needs to be done. And I know you've been with me forever and you probably sick of hearing me say it, but it's so true. If you're a company and you're working with transportation providers, the driver is the last person to see your customer. So you better have a good relationship with that driver, right? And helping them when they get stuck and helping them to solve problems it's critical to the success of your supply chain. It just is. And they are your brand, whether you want them to be or not. They are.
Jill, I can't thank you enough for this. I know it was a short notice. We were talking the other day. I'm like, you know what? I really want to do this. Yeah. And I'm like, truck driver, this is perfect. For anyone watching, how can they get in touch with you if they want to learn a little bit more about kind of just what you can provide? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Definitely hit me up on LinkedIn, Jill Clifford. You can find me there. You can email me at jclifford@freightplus.io, but LinkedIn's probably the easiest.
Awesome, Jill. Thanks so much for your time today.
Happy truckers.
Happy. And that's our show. Are you a truck driver? I want to know, honestly, if we have any truck drivers that watch this show. If so, leave a comment. I really would like to just thank you, and it'd be really cool to see that in the comment section. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel. I'm Kyle McNaught. Rock and roll.